Hi everyone, this is Tammy with Life Began in a Garden. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to make a gardener / crafting apron. These are some of the ones that I have made, and that one is the rust water plant imprint. I did a video on how to do imprints using rust water, and this is one of them that I showed in that video, and this is what I decided to do with it. So I used the strip of rust water imprints to do the pockets on this apron. I will be showing you how I made one of them, and really they're all very similar to each other. So on the one that I will be showing you, you need two pieces of material that coordinate with each other. On mine, I used one solid piece and one that had print on it. And there I'm showing the measurements. And the two pieces of fabric are already pinned together and ready to sew. You need to put them right sides together, and then we're going to sew all the way around, leaving an opening so that we can turn it right side out. And then once we turn it right side out, the biggest part of this apron will be done. So just line it up with the edge of your pressure foot, and starting where you're going to leave the opening at, sew all the way around. When you get to the corners, just make sure your needle is down and lift the pressure foot and turn your material. And then just keep doing that all the way around. Just make sure that when you get to where you're going to stop sewing, that you backstitch and that you've left enough space to get your hand in there to turn it right side out. Also make sure that you backstitch when you start and when you finish, because you don't want to tear your stitches out while you're trying to turn it right side out. I think these are very quick to make, and they're very easy to make also. And you can use so many different combinations of fabric on it. When I decided on the measurements for the ones I'm doing, I kind of went off of what would work for me and what I prefer. But if you're making this for someone else and you want to make it a little bit wider or a little bit longer, then just add whatever amount you want to add to it. It really doesn't make any difference. For my aprons, I prefer the ones that you just tie around your waist like this one is, and I prefer them to be short because I don't really want them getting in my way when I'm working in the garden. And so if you would like to make one that's a little bit longer or a little bit wider, just add however much you want to add to each and make it your way. You also will need some fabric to make binding, or the easier way to do that would be just buy a coordinating binding to use. And the binding is what you use for the straps, the ties to tie the apron on. So you could pick a color that's in your printed fabric, or you could pick just a solid color. In this one, I chose a solid color, and it's the color of the piece there that you're seeing me, the background color is that color. So I'll show you also later in the video how long my ties are, but again, you can make them however long you want them to make or to be. And on one of my aprons, I made them extra long so that it would tie around and actually, or come around and tie in the front. And that's the one that was the leaf imprint apron. That one I actually made for me, and I prefer mine to tie in the front. I know that most people tie theirs in the back, so you can just do whichever you want there. Okay, here I'm back stitching because I am to the point where I need to stop, so I have an opening to turn it right side out. And before you do that, you need to clip the corners. So clip them close to where you sewed at, but make sure that you don't actually clip the stitches. And just do that to all four corners, and when you turn it right side out, then it makes it so that those corners cooperate better. Okay, so then just find the opening and put your hand in there and start turning it right side out. And just play with the corners once you get it turned right side out. Maybe sticking something in there that's not sharp, but that has a point to it so that you can get those corners worked out the way they need to be. And then once you have them turned, I took mine to my ironing board and pressed it so that those seams would be pressed down good. And then that's showing the opening, and you need to press it. And then we're going to sew again all the way around it. So that will sew that opening closed, and it will put a hem all the way around the apron. And I just put mine, lined it up. It's not showing it here. I don't have the camera positioned right to show how close I am or how I'm sewing it, but it's lined up with the pressure foot. And you can leave more space on yours if you prefer, but I want to catch the seam, the material where the seam was from the first sewing. I want to catch it in this sewing. So sew it all the way around, and then once you get it sewn all the way around, there's only a couple other steps to doing this, and the apron is finished. Okay, so now it's finished, so just clip your strings and tidy it up a little bit. Just look over it and make sure you don't have any loose strings hanging. And then in our next step, we're going to fold it so that the fold becomes the pockets. This really is a very easy apron to make, and it would make a great gift if you would like to give it to someone who's a gardener or a crafter, or just a utility apron. You could make one for children to wear for crafting. There's so many different ideas that you could come up with on ways to make these and people to make them for. Okay, so now I'm showing how I've got it turned up for the pockets. And this pulls back over into view better because you can't really see what I'm doing there. But I'm measuring how long the pockets are going to be, or how tall it is. There. So you just decide, and that's really up to you. I think I did these 6 inches from what would be the top of the pocket area down to the bottom. But you can do yours however long you want them to be. Okay. So you just work with it until you get it the way you want it. And then pin that side down, making sure that it's lining up with the seam and it's straight. Pin it down, and then you do the same thing on the other side. And then I also measure it in the middle to make sure that the middle is the same distance, the 6 inches. And then you take it back to your sewing machine and sew those 2 sides that you're pinning. And this is showing that I'm lining it up to make sure that they are the same. And I pin that one and then do the sewing. So when you're sewing this, especially at the top of where the pocket is going to be, make sure that you backstitch several times just to reinforce it, because there may be a lot of stress on that area. So backstitch at the beginning. I usually start from the bottom and go up to the top of the pocket, but you can do it the other way around if you want. And like I said, when you get up there to the top, backstitch several times just to give it a little reinforcement. Okay, now this part is done, and I folded it down there at the top because I'm going to stitch that at the bottom part of that fold. I'm going to stitch it all the way across, and that makes the band. And also pulls that color from the back to the front to kind of coordinate with your pockets that you have on there. So this is 1.5 inches, and you can make that band a little wider if you want to also, but you do need to make it at least wide enough to hold your strings that you put through it to tie the apron. So I'm just making sure that both line up, and then you'll sew that down, and I just sew over the top of the seam that is already there from when I stitched around the whole thing. And again, on this one, back stitch several times at the beginning and the end, because that area there is an area that could be stressed also. Okay, once you have it pinned down, then it's time to sew that. So you can see the seam that I made there from when I sewed all the way around the whole piece of material. So just line your pressure foot or your needle up with that and sew all the way down. Okay, once you have that done, then it will look like this. And so just cut your strings off that you have hanging. And I try to keep up with those and cut them as I'm going so that they don't get tangled up in my next stitches that I do. So I'm going to show you 2 more things that I do to this. One of them is putting the string in there so that you can tie it. But I also have a label that I make, or that I ordered, that has Life Began in a Garden on it. And so I put that label on this also. If you want to personalize yours and make a label or order labels, whatever, then you can add your label onto the side as you're sewing the seam, or you can do it here. Oh, this is one more step that I do, is making the different pockets for it. So I just fold mine and make a crease in the fold so that I can see, because you can just barely see that crease, and then I sew down through there to make my pockets. This is something I don't measure at all because the pockets are different sizes. I'm not trying to make them all the same. I want pockets for the different things that I will be putting in there, and because this is a gardener's apron, I need a pocket that's wide enough for seed packets, and I also want a pocket that's wide enough to put my gardener gloves in there, or my plant markers, Also, I usually just label it while I'm out in the garden, so I need a permanent marker, so I make a little slot the right size for that. And also for my phone, because I usually have my phone out there when I'm gardening, and I'm horrible about laying it down somewhere, so this way, if I have a pocket I can just slide it into, maybe I will be better with keeping up with it. So what I'm saying here is I really can't give you measurements on the pockets, because you just need to decide what would be stored in the pockets and how many pockets you need, and make them that size then. Now, something that I do sometimes, if I'm not just pressing the seam, is to take a piece of painter's tape and put it where my seam needs to be. So you see me doing that there. I just tape it onto the fabric, and that's just so that you keep your lines straight. If you're not sure that your lines will stay straight, then you can do it like this and then just measure it. And then when I take it to the sewing machine, I just sew right beside that piece of tape. I don't sew on it, but right beside it. If you do happen to sew over it too, because all you have to do is just tear the tape off, and it just comes right off even if you did stitch over it. This is another area where you need to make sure that you backstitch at least a couple of times at the top of each pocket section that you're doing. And again, that's just so that the pockets are stronger and they don't start coming loose. So once you have all your pockets in your apron that you want, I think mine has 6, but you can do however many you want depending on what type of apron this is. If you love to sketch or whatever, and this is a crafting apron, you might want a lot of small pockets all the way across it. So it's entirely up to you how you do that. Okay, so I have all the pockets that I want in mine, and this is the label that I was talking about. So I'm going to sew it on. I'm going to show you this step, even though it's not necessary at all. But just in case you've never sewn a label down onto a piece of fabric, this is how I do mine. So I just decide where I want it at, and I pin it down just a little bit, and then I take it to the sewing machine and sew all the way around the edges of that label. So when I'm sewing it, I just try to line the needle up with the very edge, as close as I can get to the edge of the label that I'm sewing on. And then just do it slowly so that you can make sure you're keeping the needle on the label, and sew it all the way around and backstitch, and then it's done. And that's what it looks like. And if you do add a label to yours, you can put it wherever you want to on it. Okay, so now the final step is to attach the strings to the apron that you're going to use for tying the apron on. And so again, if you want to make your own binding, you could certainly do that, and that's actually what I did with this one. But the quicker, easier way would be to just buy the binding. If you can find binding that is the color that you would like it to be, and the width that you would like for your strings to be, or your strap, then I would just buy it and make this easier. But if not, then you just fold your material just like binding is folded. You would fold your strip of material that you've cut, and mine was approximately 26 inches long. And I just folded it like binding is folded, and then sewed all the way down, and then tied off the end so that it doesn't unravel, because I didn't want the extra bulkiness of turning that under. And then on the other end, I left a little gap in the top of the apron, so when you can slide your string in there. And this is showing the binding. This is store-bought binding. So about the width there of that blue one that I'm showing, that's about how wide mine is, and that would be how you fold it if you're making your own. And that's about 1.5 inches. Okay, so once you have your binding ready, then see how it's got that little pocket there in the top of it? Stick it in there a couple inches, and that gives you room to stitch over it and secure it so that you're not having to put it all the way through the apron. You're only putting it in 2 inches, and then I use a zigzag stitch here, and I back stitch at the beginning and the end and just sew that down with the zigzag. And that holds it in there really well. You won't have to worry about it coming undone if you do it this way. And then you do the same thing to the other side, and your apron is complete. And this is showing the completed apron and some of the things that I put in mine. So I made the small pockets to hold things like plant markers. And then, because I write on them while I'm out in the garden, I need a Sharpie, so I made a pocket for that. It doesn't really matter where your pockets are on there, just wherever you decide or wherever you have space to do the next pocket. And that's a seed packet. So there's a pocket big enough to put the seed packets in, and then a phone. And on this one, you might want to actually measure your phone with it to make sure that whatever size your phone is fits in there. And then my gardening gloves. And then I still have an extra pocket there for more seeds or whatever I decide to put in there. So I think it makes a really neat gardening apron, but it would also make a very nice crafting apron. And there's so many choices in material and how this looks. And that's the one that I did the leaf imprint on, and this one has sunflowers on it. I hope you will try these, and I hope you enjoy them. I hope you have a very blessed day, and thank you so much for watching my channel.